Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. Um, so Dr. Chuck put up a demo um, yesterday, so I'm just going to paste that in the chat room. This morning. So this code went in yesterday, so you can take a look at it. But we are going to talk about Sakai Morpheus today and take a deep dive into the code and see, and then try to figure out what people are interested in doing and helping and testing the system. So at the moment, it's pretty basic, but you can log in. We only have 2 breakpoints at the moment. So we have, this is our main screen. And then we have our kind of mobile side here. So let's log in as admin. And you can follow along if you like. So we can see we have our main menu here and our side menu. And when we go to the breakpoint, which is about 800 pixels at the moment, we have our top menu is here under the hamburger, and then our side menu is here with this icon for the moment. We can have both menus on at the same time or individually. Um, so that's the very quick overview, and we'll look into more of the Sass here in a second. Are there any questions right away? You may be muted, so. Okay. So I'm looking at who's on, and I think some of you have seen my demo, or my presentation rather, at Open Apereo, but we're just going to go over some of the stuff because while I've been in it for the last 2 months, you probably have forgotten what we were doing. So let's just go over the Sass stuff. Okay, so we'll dig into Morpheus. Just go over the structure before we look at the code. Okay, we can skip the video. So Sass is semantically awesome style sheets, and what they bring, what CSS doesn't have, are variables, mixin, extend, nesting, and import and partials. And we're going to look at these in more detail. And you can learn more at sasslang.com. Sass is a great community. There's a lot of demos and tutorials and write-ups for that. So let's dig into variables. And this is probably what most of you will just be dealing with, which is just changing variables. So to go into Morpheus and change colors and and logos and things like that, just to give your skin a nice look. What's great about a variable is it's in one place, ideally, and that means it will cascade then through the code. So instead of having to look for the color, as you probably do now through the CSS, you just change it in one place. And we'll look at mixin. So a mixin is a way to kind of abstract repeating functionality. So here we are including the default type size. We've created a mixin that adds font size and line height. And this will generate this. So we have the same code here. What we'll do is look in mixins are more powerful with arguments, so they're more like a function, and they can take arguments. So here we're passing the color function. So what we've done is pass a dark gray to the paragraph and a light off-white to the footer. And you can see that here. And then you can pass also size, and you can have many, many arguments depending on what kind of reproducible CSS you want. So add extends also works a little like mixins. Again, it's for reproducing, keeping your code dry, and not repeating yourself. So this is a default type style size that we would use all over the site. The one thing it does differently is with the extends is it will, instead of writing P font size 16 and line height font size 16 and footer font, it puts them together. So it's smart in that way. And this is extends continued, so we can use it together. So you can see that it's bundling the default type size together, but it's adding, it's keeping the color separate. So these are helpful reusable blocks. And then this is just another feature of Sass, and this is just nesting. And as far as nesting, you really don't want to go too deep. You really want to avoid putting your whole DOM in here and starting from HTML to body and things like that. It just gets too confusing and too brittle. So here is our styles here. And then what's also great about Sass is you can then split things into import statements and partials. And partials, if they have an underscore, means that they don't generate a corresponding CSS file. And so we can just, in our base CSS, we are pulling in our reset here. And that gives us this code here. Okay. And then Sass is great, but it can also be misused. And it kind of just needs a good organization principle. So what we're doing with Morpheus is using the SMAX, which is scalable and modular architecture for CSS principle, just as a way to organize our files and to make it easier for you to find the relevant CSS and to know where it's best to contribute. Okay. So if you're creating some styles, where you want to put them in the style sheet. The problem with CSS is people tend to just add, rather than debug it and find out exactly what's going on, they just add it to the end of the file and override what comes above it. And then people get into adding important for everything, and it just gets very messy. So we can learn more at smax.com. There are 5 types of categories. So we have base. These are our base styles, our layout, our modules, our states, so is hidden, is visible, and our theme. So let's just run over base. These are your defaults, your typography, your links, your form elements. Layout is divide the page into sections. So we have one for portal. So these are for sidebar and our article. Our modules. So modules are perhaps the most important part of this, and most likely where you can contribute your code. So these are reusable modular parts of the design. So here we have a pod, and then we have a call-out version. So this would be our code here. And then state is really if things are active or hidden or expanded. And just putting the is in front of it gives a clue to what's going on here. So, and then theme is similar to states. It's just that we can override the default by using theme. So we have combined the two in Morpheus. So let's just look over the directory structure. So in our skin folder, we have Morpheus master, and then we have three example skins. Currently, they're all pretty much the same code, but eventually they will be quite different. Morpheus default is the aim is to make it look in the vein, and that's what we're showing today, in the vein of the current Sakai. So we'll use the Sakai blue. Example U, we want to do quite a bit of a different version to show how extensible Morpheus is. And then right to left, we want to have a good working right to left version. And with Sass, we can set in some variables and conditions to trigger that. So I think there's about 7 or 8 Neoskin examples. And I don't want to have to create that many. So I think 3 should be sufficient. Okay. So Morpheus master will contain the Sass files and the compile script, and it will not have any CSS in it. The other 3 examples will have CSS in here. Okay. So to import a module, we'll use this code, and this will be related to this file here. So if we're, say, importing the footer, it'd be modules footer underscore footer. And that is the corresponding file in the repo. It'd be Morpheus master sass modules footer underscore footer dot scsa. Okay, so here's a more realistic one, alerts. And then depending on the complexity of the module, we might import additional files. So here, if we have a lot of variables that are by default, we want to let people override. Oops. Sorry about that. Yes, so variables, mixins are mixins for that module only. We'll look at some of those. And extendables are extendable styles for that module only. And so to get started with Morpheus, the only changes you really need to do is set up in your Sakai download trunk, because it's only, this is to see what's here is in trunk as of yesterday. So we download trunk and add these to your Sakai properties. So we'll ship with the 3 custom themes. These files are in Morpheus Sass themes, and we'll look at that. And all the variables that are for these examples will be in here. And then if I wanted to create my own theme, say an NYU one, I would add that in here. And then with the compile script, it will create a new folder for me. So these are the kind of customizations. I think what I'm going to do is just pause for questions. Are there any questions at this moment? Can you all hear me?
Yep,
I can.
I'm hearing
Okay.
you fine.
Okay, great.
Hear you just fine.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's have a look at the let's look at. I worked on the README yesterday a little bit, and I'm working on documentation as we go. So Sass is based on Ruby, so you'll need to have Ruby installed. Um, so once you change your Sakai properties, yeah, you can then rebuild your trunk, and you will have you'll get something like this. So you'll have your local host, and um, this is coming out of the box. If you want to then start changing things, or at least playing around with it, you're going to have to start getting installing Ruby and running Sass. Um, I'm not sure about you guys, but I work on a Mac OS machine, a MacBook Air, and um, Mac OS comes with Ruby. So you can just install using, if it's Ruby 1.92 onwards, I think. The gems are built into that one, and you can just do gem install Sass. Yes, I will put the documentation here. And that's in the SVN. I have a plugin. This is a Markdown file in my browser, so to display the Markdown nicely. So you may see it just as a text file. Anyway, so the one thing to be wary of is if you use the system Ruby, it tends to run into some permissions issues, especially if you're doing a lot of Sass stuff and a lot of jams, and there's confusion. So most people who do a lot of Ruby install either RVM or RBENV. I'm not sure how you say that, but they're basically Ruby um, for installing different versions of Ruby. I use RVM. There's some details here, and the main reason for this is to maintain the our 2.8 NYU skin. We're using older versions of Sass and Compass because it was built against those ones. And for Morpheus, we have updated to the latest Compass and Sass to take advantage of some of the stuff that I'll be showing you later. And just to be able to have both of those working properly, I've installed 2 versions of Ruby, and they have different gems, and it's all going pretty well. In our so what we have, so once you have Ruby set up, the easiest way to do this is actually to just use Bundler. So Bundler is a Ruby gem that maintains Ruby dependencies. So in Morpheus, I'll just go to the code right now, we have a file called a gem file. And let me bump up the font size a little bit. It has the exact versions of Sass and Compass and all the dependencies that you need here. So once you have Bundler install, you just run, once you've installed Bundler, you run bundle install, and that will then download all of these necessary gem files and the right versions, and everything should start working then. You can then just use Compass Watch to start watching your Morpheus master folder if you want. And then it will see if you make any changes to any of your Sass files, it will compile a new version of your CSS. We're going about this in a little bit of a different way than usual, insofar as the general rule with having a Sass-based web application is to do the compiling in the build. but that we felt for Sakai 10 was and there are Maven plugins to do that. We have this at NYU. We have Jenkins and we have Ruby, and it's compiled um, in the build, and it works great. We wanted to lower the barrier of entry to people looking at this. So what we've done is created also a compile script. So what the compile script will do, it will generate the example skins and copy over the CSS to the examples. And this is done by this command here. So just make sure your Ruby file is executable, and it will run a Compass compile for you. The one thing that we have to worry about is work on the workflow issue. Is that people may sorry, 1 second. Will be tempted to add CSS changes directly to the CSS. So what I've done is add a warning to the top of the CSS file that these files will be overwritten. And this is on top of all the CSS files. So just as a reminder that not to add your CSS here. And I think, yeah. So we just look at this one. Also part of a way to increase the productivity of Morpheus is that all of code is minified by default because that's the fastest way to download. So this makes it a little harder to change anyway on the fly. Okay. So are there any questions at this point? So why don't I just show you the compile in action. So I'm just going to call, oops. I'm going to cut and paste that properly. I'm going to call the compile function here. And this is just a simple Ruby script that knows to look in this Sass themes folder and pull out any of the theme files and then run the CSS. So you may see a lot of things thinking. I have a program called Folder Watch running, which copies any of my local changes from the repo into my web server so that we're in sync. So this takes a minute. This is really the idea is that you're working away and then you just want to commit this code into commit this back up into trunk. And you can see here actually I do have a Morpheus-NYU code here, and I'll show you how that's working in the code. So in our Sass file, we have a folder called themes. And we have our Morpheus default, our example -u, and our Morpheus -NYU, and our Morpheus RTL. And then these just have some various overrides. And this is kind of where you would create your version of Morpheus. If you just wanted to really just go in and change some of the stuff. If you want to really go in and customize things and add modules that are just for your university, you might be better off cloning Morpheus Master and calling it your version, and then building on top of that. Or just adding your modules in and not committing them back to trunk if you don't want to commit them back to trunk. So, okay, and let's just take a look at the Compass compile file. So basically, it just has where the directories are, and then it switches. It runs Compass compile with production, so that's minification and no development command. So okay, let me just show you the. When you're working in development mode, so if you just run Compass watch, you will get a line number and a link to the file. Here, so that's helpful for debugging. I'll show you some source map debugging a little later, which is where you can actually edit the SCSS file directly in your browser. So let's go to Portal, and we can see we have line 19, that this is Sass space buttons button mixing is where this is coming from. So this is very helpful. In our final code, these commands are removed and this file is minified. With Sass, you can configure your output style. So we have two output styles. We have production, which is compressed, and then otherwise it's expanded. And you can leave your line comments will be false if it's in production, but it will be true if you're just developing. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. Let me just dig into a little bit more. So this goes over, in this document here, we're just going over how the folders, the file structure and the folder structure works, and how they have the Sass Compass compile, or Sakai Compass compile works. So let's dig into the Sass a little bit. Let's see. So this is our custom themes here. So some things that we might want to change are institutional colors, our logos, and our button colors. And we can add those variables that we want to override to our themes file. And then, okay, let's look at some web fonts. So currently if I reload it, we might see it. You'll see the font change a slight bit on load, and that's because we are loading in a web font. We're loading in Open Sans from Google. So I'll go into Sass and look at our base web fonts partial. Okay, so in our variables we have our font stack. So these are our font web safe fonts, which we try to pick out the closest thing to font stack. And then our web font is Open Sans. So we're calling this mixin called WF Loader, which is Web Font Loader. We're just passing the font name and the file name. So this loads a mixin. And this basically just writes out code for Google. So we're using the Web Font Loader. And it also puts in different weights and things like that. So let's look at the compile CSS, and we'll have a look at that. Okay. Okay, so here we have, it's maybe a little hard to pull out, but our body is pulling in Helvetica, Noi, Helvetica and Arial sans serif. So that's loading automatically. And then once the JavaScript, the web font loader, I'm not sure if you folks have used that, but it's from Google and Typekit, and that just adds a class to your body once the font is loaded. And then, so we have, or adds it to the HTML tag so that then we can switch out the font to Open Sans. Let's look at inspect element. We might be able to see it in action. So here is our HTML. We can see here are our various fonts. So anything that starts with WF is a web font JavaScript. So that's just loading. Let's see if we can see it reloading the page now. Yeah, you could kind of see it for a second there. It just flashed. So that's just a way of displaying the font once it's actually there to display. You may have seen this in the wild, but sometimes a bit of a site and there won't be any text on there. And you might see some just underlines for links. And it just takes, especially on mobile or a low bandwidth connection, it just takes a while for fonts to load. This loads the text immediately, and then once the font is actually ready, it swaps it out. So, and this is configurable so that you could use any Google font for what you want. I like Open Sans. I think for the default, it's open source, and I think it fits within the Sakai project as well as looking nice. It's got a lot of different weights, so we can do a lot with the typography for that. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? I will try to leave time for a discussion at the end. Okay. This is a lot of information in a short time, but I just wanted to give you an overview. One thing I have on for debugging purposes is you might see this full navigation blue bar up here. This is a code just to let me know what breakpoint I'm on. So that if here it's a little more obvious because things change quite a lot and there are only 2 breakpoints. But once, if we add in a number of breakpoints for various conditions, then we have the option of knowing exactly what breakpoint we're on. So I'm going to log in. So the idea is we won't just have a mobile navigation, but we'll have something that's more optimized for small tablets and larger tablets and desktop and things like that. Okay, so Eduardo Ray has talked about iframes. So Dr. Chuck is probably the person to ask about this. Um, we have an option to remove all iframes. We want to make Morpheus work with that, but not be reliant on that.
Yeah, Eduardo, I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me? Or you probably
I can hear you.
Too. Okay, Mark, you can hear me. Yeah, I mean, the iframe code is there. I briefly tested it this morning, and it doesn't seem to work in Morpheus. And I'm going to guess that's just some extremely tiny bit of markup that got moved somewhere. And so I'm going to spend the next couple of days figuring out why that didn't work and just fixing it. I don't think it's going to be a problem, but it's a bit of a Rube Goldberg device that makes iframes go away. And so I'm quite confident that we will be able to get that fixed very rapidly. And so there's no real problem with that. And so you're seeing some things with frames and some things without frames. Of course, the things that are portlets don't have frames, but the things that still have frames. So I will fix that soon, soon, soon. So I'll go back off.
Actually, it's a good segue. So one thing, let's look at our Sass main files. So I'm just going to close up this scary amount of files here, just to concentrate on these ones. So like I said, if it has an underscore, it's a partial. So that means it doesn't generate a corresponding CSS file. So the only corresponding CSS files are these ones here. So we have access, which I still think is used. We have PDA. The main ones we are interested in are portal and tool. Okay, so in portal, we are importing our warning. So this is just to put on top of every file that this is a compile file. And then we're just pulling in our gems that we community-based Ruby gems that we are using for creating stuff like breakpoints and compass. Then we're pulling in our partials, or some common variables, and then our configurations, and so on. So then we're pulling in our base and our modules and things like that. In our tool, we have some overlap as well. We're pulling in a lot of the same stuff, and then we're pulling in a lot more modules that are just tool specific. What's great about if we do switch to a frameless model is we can have a style sheet, one style sheet, say global, which I put in here for a moment, and we can just have everything in here. We don't have to have all of that duplication. I hate the iframes, and I would love them to go away. They are certainly the biggest issue with I found with Sakai. But I think we do need to. We can rip them out, but then we will have some time figuring out how to deal with um, the tool navigation itself and how things are going to work with that. So I think while it may be easy to just pull them out, I think we still have some decisions to make in the interaction design of how it's going to work without iframes. The idea for Morpheus is that it will be reusable, easily to switch to an iframeless model, because we have all our modules in there. We just put them in the order we need. So instead of them going into tool CSS, they'll just go in with the portal stuff. I also just don't want to make it reliant on the iframeless, because that probably won't be solved till Sakai 11. But I wanted to play nicely with it. It's kind of a balance between the two. Let's look at, speaking of old problematic things, let's look at how we deal with IE 8. So we've got some mixins that deal with old IE8. So basically, we're importing here our portal or our tool file, and then we're telling it to that not to print media queries and to instead take the content of the desktop, which is called full navigation here, and use that. So it prints out for IE8 a separate style sheet, but it doesn't use media queries, but it's able to take the context, the content from the desktop media query, shall we say, and put that in there. So it's that helps us deal with this, and it also means that we can wrap our hacks for IE8 in something that is not polluting the better CSS for the other style sheets. And we're doing the same here in Tool. Let's just look at the breakpoints for a second. So we have, this is our list of breakpoints. We're just using 2 here. And we're converting them to M's. And this is working on the breakpoint gem, which is a great module made by Team Sass. And we can have as many breakpoints as we want here. I'm just starting with 2. This no query means this is the one to use for IE8. Okay, so as the need arises, we will add in breakpoints. But just since I've been focusing on just the navigation, I've just put those 2 in there and then adding them in to as we go along. So this is kind of the idea of responsive design, that you start on the mobile and then you expand it and you add breakpoints when things start to break down. So you can see at this point, we kind of need to do something about this menu. This one's okay, but just maybe this, we have a lot of space here. Maybe we can break this into a different style so that we could have things going along. This would be for a tablet. Or when this line length becomes too long, we might want to do something like putting these side by side. Okay. Are there any questions at the moment? One thing, I'll just look at some of the, so Morpheus is, of course, 2 things. It is a Sass-based skin, and it is a set of templates. So we have in our, and these are velocity templates here, but we have our stuff where we've upgraded everything to HTML5. So here is our, let's increase the font size. Here is our HTML5 doc type. And we've cleaned this up a lot. One thing I've done is add some conditional comments that for IE9. So that's just to load the portal.ie style sheet. And it doesn't load. So that only loads for IE8 and below. And then otherwise it loads the other one for IE9 and all non-IE browsers. One thing you might notice that's missing is I've removed all the JavaScript. I've put them at the bottom of the page. And this is kind of standard practice now. The only JavaScript I'm loading is Modernizer here. And that is a feature detection JavaScript library. So we need that loaded to see what classes are supported. So what CSS3 stuff is supported. So this is what all of these things here on the top. At the moment, for just development, I'm testing for everything. So to see if we have geolocation, Flexbox, Canvas, all of this other stuff. Once we know what we're just looking for, we can narrow this down and make a smaller JavaScript. So now all the JavaScript stuff is in the bottom of the sites tag right before the last body. And this is nice because you don't actually need to use onReady anymore because the JavaScript loads after the HTML. And this will make the site speedier too, as far as loading. Okay, so one thing I'll go over and very briefly is for my personal development environment. This is totally optional, but I'm using Grunt, and that is doing my compass watch. It's live reloading. It's concatenating all the JavaScript files and minifying them. So if we just look at our JavaScript file, what I'm able to do is I have Modernizer as a library that loads in there, but I have a source file for all my JavaScript files. And as I'm adding ones, I'm just putting them in individually. That is then concatenated into one Morpheus script subfile and then minified into and uglified here. And this is done every time I make a change here. This is the only file that will be used in production, but we have the source, and this makes it easier to figure out. So I have my Google web font here, which I'm loading Open Sans. Then I have my responsive menus here. And then at the moment, this is pretty much everything that was in Neo portal scripts. But I'll be breaking this up as I go over things into individual files. And that just makes it's a bit like the Sass, it makes it easier to know where things are and change things. But at the same time, we get the benefit of getting the best production JavaScript and the best minified and concatenated. The same with the CSS. One reason I'm doing this is because of source map. So in Chrome, you can actually use the inspector. It creates a map, which is a file that finds out where all the SCSS files are, and maps it to the CSS so that when I inspect this element, you'll see down here, let me make this a bit bigger. That I'm mapped to the SCSS file instead of the CSS file. So I'm not looking at the comments here and then going to the file. I can actually go directly to the file. And if this is set up in your web server, you can actually edit the file and save it. And that goes back to that. I haven't quite got that set up at the moment, but I will be writing documentation on that if anyone is interested in using this method. I find it very quick as well. So let's undo that. Okay. So that's just, so the grunt part is totally optional. I don't want to make add Ruby and Node into Sakai. But it certainly works well with that, and it's in the repo if you want to do that, and there will be detailed instructions on how to do that. I think unless you're doing some core development on Morpheus, it might be overkill for you. Okay. One other thing, I just wanted to look at some of the class names. This might be a good example. So one thing with rewriting the templates, I wanted to keep the IDs as much as possible. but to add a lot of classes. And then in the CSS to use classes rather than IDs because it makes it much more compatible. And have a lot more classes that do just one thing. So here we have an example here where if there's a JS in front of it, prefixed by JS dash, that means that class is there for JavaScript. And you don't, so that JavaScript can find it and do things to it, and that it doesn't have any corresponding CSS files to it. What tends to happen in older CSS is the ID works too hard. So the ID has 12 different styles on it that aren't reusable. And it's also reliant on JavaScript, and there's just a lot going on there. By adding more classes, we can kind of separate what they do, have a single responsibility, and then have the idea of a state and a JavaScript. So a state would be is hidden, is dash hidden, or is dash expanded, and that just gives one an idea of what's going on there by just looking at the source. And then the JS just tells you that this class is there for JavaScript and is not related to CSS. And I'll be writing up with links to this in more detail when I get a chance. Okay. I think just for the interest of time, I could probably talk for another hour. I'll stop the presentation and then open it up for questions. So do we have any questions? You may be muted.
So Mark, great presentation. Yeah, Mark, great presentation. Thank you for this.
Sure.
I'm sure there's a bunch of people who are going to sort of grab a developer copy of Sakai, their own dev copy of Sakai and set the settings. I mean, exactly what I did this morning.
Yeah.
And what we're all going to start finding is like little things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how do you want us to handle the little things? Do you want us to, make a JIRA for every little thing? Do you want us to quickly send you email? Do you want us to just patch it and put it in trunk and then you say, oh no, that wasn't what I meant? I mean, we're glad that you put this in quickly, right? So we can start reacting to it. But a bunch of us are going to start crawling all over it now.
Yeah.
And we don't, if you sort of got a couple of plans for the next couple of weeks and we should just kind of like watch over your shoulder as you clean a few more things up, then I think that would be fine. You just have to kind of tell us how to work with you and what would work best for you.
Yeah, I think
we want to help, but we don't want to hurt by helping too much.
I think JIRA is probably the way to go. There is a master JIRA, which is Morpheus Cleanup, and I'll just post that in here. So yes, this is definitely an early release. I have not finished what I'm doing or even got that far into it. I've really just got in the menus working, and I've kind of got to the portal head, this part here, so just the header, but none of the tools have been restyled, and we will need to do
but
some work on
just
that.
Just as an example, if you scroll all the way down, you'll find that big black bar that is the under scroll all the way down.
Yeah.
That stuff right there, right?
Yes, that hasn't been dealt with yet.
Right, and I mean, is the best way to do is to kind of let you deal with that, and we'll just kind of be patient with you, or are we going to like hack all over it and then just kind of ruin it for you? I mean, again, it's really, should we be patient and only give you little things and let you keep working the way you're working, or should we sort of pick up and carry some of the load for you?
I think for right now, so in the next, say to the end of August, let me just keep working at it. I'll also be away for a week or two, so. But if you do find any major issues, JIRAs are good. There's definitely things I haven't really gone beyond. Obviously, there's only a few icons here, and there will be more.
Okay.
added in.
I mean, I'm going to work on the iframe
Yeah,
stuff, and I'll
that would be
communicate
great.
with you if I do that. And but there's little things, you can imagine that maybe Alex would want to work on Portal Chat or something. But if you're going to
Yeah.
like do the first cut on Portal Chat and get that kind of working, and then he can fine tune it and test it, versus do you want Alex to just, as an example, dive in tomorrow morning and solve it? Or is it easier just to kind of let you work through the next couple of weeks and get the first basic solution in place, and then we'll test it for littler things?
Yeah, I think let me get the first basic thing in there, and then we can build on it.
Okay.
One thing that is also in each of the, I forgot to mention, is there is a style guide in each of the themes, and I will be adding more Sakai components, but this will give you a way to see your how things are supposed to look.
I'm going to guess that it would be okay at some level. I mean, my intention for 11 is to ship with this as not just the default, but the only portal, right? And so, for example, I looked at Profile Tool, and it takes the style pattern that very few of our tools take, which means that its top menu has icons.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, Steve, get rid of those icons, dude. Be like everybody else, right? I mean, you probably come up and show. And I'm like, Steve could start working and taking those icons out. I mean, because they're going to look bad in 11. And we've got 10 branched, and,
Yeah, what I'd love to see, especially with things like the that menu system, and Profile 2, I believe, is a culprit, is that it uses different markup, quite different markup than every other tool. Maybe it was to put in those images, but I don't think. I think everything uses an unordered list, and it doesn't. So if we could create some kind of standardization on markup for every tool, that would be great.
Well, or just, Steve, I'm just not picking on Steve specifically. He's probably not even on the list on thing because he's in Australia and it's the wrong time of night. But just, if Steve felt like going and cleaning up within tool look and feel, that would be highly welcomed.
Yeah, that's one of the part of the style guide is to create a consistent look and feel throughout the whole thread Sakai, because I do feel that there's things work differently in different tools, and that is a kind of a legacy from different teams and different universities building them. But I think it's a bad user experience.
Also, different times, right?
In different
what
times.
was ideal 5 years ago versus 2 years ago versus 1 year ago is all kind of different. And we kind of also were allowing ourselves to explore some different styles to see what we liked. And now it's kind of time to herd those all back into one style.
And we just found in our usability testing, people were expecting to be able to edit in place, and where it wasn't possible. And I think the expectations of how things interact has changed quite a bit for some of the tools.
Just as an example, for me, my first reaction to, I think it was Adam from Oxford, was saying, move the options up to be the pencil. And I'm like, that's impossible. And then, of course, I have to start saying, oh, wait, maybe it's not impossible.
Yeah.
And so those kind of usability improvements we should start looking at.
Yeah.
We don't need you to be completely furnished with all the cute little cosmetic things to realize major direction changes in style guide.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would make sense. I'd like to even just on the options just have a class there so that we could put a cog, because most of the options people are a little confused about, but it's really just settings for that tool. And then again,
whatever it is, I want to take the things that I want to make it so at least the velocity tools that are very common, that have an options button and nothing else, can at least show that have a choice to switch that option up to into the title bar.
Yeah,
I think I
can
figure that out.
Yeah.
Without sort of major pain and without breaking backwards compatibility. Doesn't mean there still won't be 2 or 3 tools that have their own groove on somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, things like lessons tools have kind of has changed things a bit.
But yeah, okay. I'll let
some of that
may be
the future. but I know it's quite different compared to others.
Well, as this moves toward default, I think it's going to, anything that's not compatible style-wise with it is going to kind of start jumping out like a sore thumb, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think the idea is just kind of build it, and then as we're building it, take note of major hurdles, and then submit JIRAs to the people involved to get them to change their markup or add a class here and there. Really, adding classes would be probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, and from a marketing perspective, honestly,
Mhm.
you know, if this became the default on nightlies, if it was good enough in 3 weeks to be the default with no frames in nightly, even though there are a few little kind of ugly bits left,
Yeah,
I think we're so far ahead with this being frameless and default on nightly September 1st from a community and to show this is our direction, not like have it hidden and on just on a few developers' desks. And I also I'm thinking that we need to fire up a QA effort, you know, in the October, November timeframe on this.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it might not be QA to release, but just take the same people that do QA and crawl all over this code.
Yeah.
This new UI, just crawl all over it as if it were a release, but let's do it months before a release.
Yeah.
Not in a code freeze situation, but we're going to crawl all over trunk for a while in ways that we would normally crawl all over a tag.
Yeah, I think that would be good. We've done this for our 2.8 skin, and we got everything. So I still have some code to pull that over. I've dealt with some of the issues that we're going to run into, especially in tests and quizzes, to make it mobile friendly. There's a bunch of stuff that I've done once, so it'll be a little easier, and I kind of know what to expect. So once we get into cleaning up the tools themselves, we're gonna then we'll definitely need people to check things in, IE 8 and IE 11 and Firefox on Linux and various things like that. Certainly, I'm building this against Chrome at the moment. One thing I'll just quickly demo is that in Chrome Canary, I have this new thing that might be pretty useful. So I have these breakpoint indicators, but there's a new thing in the latest nightly of Chrome, and that is, I think it's called Device Central, and you can now load up your styles using various devices. So I can get the iPhone 4, and you probably have to reload to get the right CSS. And then it also can show the breakpoints and things like that. So, and you can orientate it. So that's going to help us a little bit, especially with the mobile effort here. So we can see here's a breakpoint. This is our narrow navigation, and this is our big one. So if we do have, say, 6 or 7 breakpoints, which we probably will eventually, it's just going to be easier to debug things here. So, anyway, I just found this out yesterday, so I've been playing with it. It does have some network throttling, so that's pretty good. Because things seem super fast when it's a local development or if you're on your university's T3, but if someone's trying to load this on the phone, we're going to notice quite a bit of difference. Okay, I'm just going to look through the questions. Is there any questions? So I think what we'll probably do is do another webinar, maybe in the end of August, or probably the week before Labor Day here in the U.S., just to check in and see what's going on and what needs to be done and where we are. And then if people want to contribute and kind of really get active on this, then we can maybe do that every 2 weeks. And it can be a bit more of a developer call. So. Okay. But I definitely want to work with Dr. Chuck and make Morpheus work with the iframes, with and without the iframes. And I will certainly need some help when we get into some of the more thorny issues um, that need some back-end code
Yeah,
changes.
it's yeah. I think one way or the other, we probably will not be able to completely eliminate the iframes. The one place I've never been able to eliminate the iframes and don't expect to be able to eliminate them is on the home page in a course that has 4 rectangles. The whole iframe elimination technique is 1 tool per page because it's really a variation on the tool URL. And so unless we rewrite all those 4 tool placements as portlets, which is not impossible between now and Sakai 10, those will be rendered in frames in Sakai 11. These will still be rendered in frames. Another way, yes, if you go into a regular site and you hit a home button, that's actually the thing that breaks the fastest, right? Go to a site and hit the home button. That breaks the worst and the fastest, both with and without frames. Because it's got 4 on a screen, and we're so commonly done, right? That right there, that's frames, except that the site information guy is not a frame, but recent announcements and message center notifications are frames.
Yeah.
Now I could rewrite those 2 guys in pretty quickly in JSR 168, I bet, because their UI isn't that gigantic, right? And that would fix the home, but I think another thing to think about is we might find that we just redo home as dashboard. Dashboard then becomes a single home, and you know, we come up with something else and just replace home with dashboard. Although I'm not sure everyone's going to want to replace home with dashboard, so we'll work through all that.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna guess that at the end of the day, we'll still won't be able to say every site. You will be able to make choices that make you iframe free. But if you insist on having that home look exactly the way it looked like, we might not be able to guarantee iframe free at that point, because it's the multiple rectangles on the screen that causes the problem.
Yeah. And one thing we did was, you'll notice that these are in little boxes. Because we had issues with the iframes and usability testing where people really didn't understand that there were iframes. And this layout's not too bad, but sometimes there's a huge white space if it's all white on white.
Exactly. Yep. And by eliminating iframes, that just goes away. Thank heaven, right? Yeah. That extra white space that sometimes we put that in there, and so yeah, that will go away. But this will be our hardest thing to fix.
Yeah, as long as we are surfacing useful information, I think that should be our guiding principle. That whatever we put on the homepage is actually useful. I think the dashboard makes puts a lot of good useful information. Currently in our 2.8 instance, the home for my workspace really has no useful information. And it's a page you log into every time you log into the system. So
exactly, it's the least useful page in the entire system.
Yes, and so when you see the
most often.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's kind of like duh, but it's been that way for a decade. But we can, just time to fix that.
Okay, well, thank you all. I appreciate your. I'm glad to see such excitement and to have. I think it was 16 people come in. That was great. And there's plenty of work to do, but I'm excited to be working on it. And NYU is still happy for me to be working on it. We're excited. So, and then once I've got to a point where collaboration will be a little easier, I will start collaborating. But if you want to take it for a test drive and try to figure it out and run into problems and say there's no documentation for this, how does this work? Let me know and I'll write it up and help out. Because I do definitely want to leave good documentation. So to make the system useful, because it is a little complicated to get started, but with good documentation, it's going to be very easy to use. Thank you. And then feel free to email me offline as well if you have questions. I will be gone from the 6th to the 18th, I think, of August, but I will So if you don't hear from me, I will try to set my away message before I leave. It's because I'm on vacation, not because I'm ignoring you. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Bye bye.